then as now, the media each has different constraints that affect how they do business. And in TV, you have both a time constraint, which is that you want to get on the air and do that. And you also want to beat the competition. That was as true in 1966 as I'm sure it's true today. And when we had the newspapers, we handled that when the internet came along. That we do a 2-hour rotate. We do the update our internet operations every 2 hours. And that's kind of how we handle that. And of course, with the newspaper, you print it and then you distribute it, people read it, and then you do it again tomorrow and the next day and so on and so on. But that's really not true in TV. So we're going to tell the story of one Saturday night, when a prominent citizen died just minutes before we're going on our 10 o'clock news. And I was down there, as I always was, just a kid hanging around there. And it came across that very prominent man whose name I'll just leave out. He's an industrialist in town, and everybody knew him. Everybody knew him nationwide. We put it on the air. This has died. And then you said, and you kind of wait to see, did you beat your competitors? We beat all the other two network stations. And that's good. And yet, it's, but 3-4 minutes go by and still the competition is watching us. It's like they haven't aired this story. And then ring, 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 ring. Hello? It's this guy who supposedly died. And he is not calling from heaven. He is calling from somewhere in St. Louis. And he is very much alive. And the person who died happened to be a pipe fitter with the same name who lived in South St. Louis. And so, 5 or 6 minutes into the 10 o'clock newscast, we're back on the air saying, good news, it's Lathery, riven from the ashes. It's Phoenix, that we put the guy back alive again. I'm going to tell the story of when I first walked in there, went to work there. In those days, again, we're in mid-66, we're working for a NBC affiliate, one of the largest in the country at that point, one of the largest stations in the country. I think it was the 8th largest station in terms of viewers and revenue and so on. So, it wasn't chopped liver. And St. Louis was a much bigger market in town. They had 850,000 people. Today, I think they've dropped under 300,000. It's but the larger St. Louis area is probably 2.5 million. But the city it became a donut. Anyway, I walk in, and in those days we had ABC, NBC, CBS stations, and we had 2 daily newspapers: the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. The Globe was Republican. The Post was Democrat, and the TV stations tried to kind of. There was we had Channel 9, which we had a PBS station by that time, WETC. So anyway, pretty much, if the guys wanted to get together and cook a story, everybody figuratively could pull up a chair around a table. The 3 TV stations and the 2 radio, the 2 newspapers, and they could do the following, and did. And so I walk in, and I'm handed a list of what I'm told are black leaders, Negroes in those days. And they say, and I'm told, here's a list of purported Negro leaders, and if any of them call, do not return their call, do not put them on the air, do not allude. We do not cover those people. You go, really? And then they say, wind up figuratively throw it over the shoulder, and then they say, but now here is the list of another group of prominent black leaders. Now, these leaders we respect. We think that they're thoughtful. We do not agree with them hardly at all, but nonetheless, we will put them on the air, and their views are those which we will give prominence to. And so that was kind of the unwritten agreement across the five media, three TV and two newspapers. Now, the reality is St. Louis went along and really had no racial demonstrations. That they didn't burn the town down like Detroit and Washington, D.C. in the late 60s, and really virulent stuff went on. And I think it was because they gave voice to the more responsible black leaders. And I think that in Washington, D.C., with the Washington Post and with the Detroit and the other places, they felt that, we have to give everybody a chance to, and it seems to be pretty clear to me, at least, that the radical voices will drive out the reasonable voices. And I think we saw that and have seen that a number of times more recently, that the crazier you are and the crazier things you say now are more likely to get onto TV and cable, and more likely to allow you to progress. And also it drives reason out of the public debate. So that's how I handled it in the 60s, and that's how that's how I handle my newspapers. I let everybody come in and sit in my office and say really loony stuff, but I didn't put that in the paper, not on page 1, not on page 20 or 30. We knew who you were, and we listened to. I mean, we had one guy who wanted to jackhammer up 3rd Street and plant trees. Kind of an early arborist, nutty. But we also had the guys from Elam City who later on the Timothy McVeigh guys, and Timothy McVeigh was behind the blowing up of the government building in Oklahoma City and killing more than 200 people in the mid-90s. And those guys were in our office too. And so we knew who they were, but we certainly did not give them any air. Well, I was a young kid, and the news guys and our teams, in those days they were film teams, film crews. They kind of eyed the young kid, and and I'd go off and have lunch somewhere, and they'd go off and have lunch. I didn't pay much attention to it. And one day they said, "Come with us. We're going down to the Missouri Grill." I'd say, "Well, okay, what's at the Missouri Grill?" The Missouri Grill was the watering place for the media. That's where the Post-Dispatch and the Globe Democrat people were, and that's where the other TV, everybody was at the Missouri Grill, having a snort at lunch or after work and so on. And I knew I had progressed when I got invited to the Missouri Grill. Now, I worked a lot. I would dispatch the film crews. When you took over, and like when I was producing, really the big show I produced was the 5 o'clock news, which led into the NBC nightly news, then Huntley Brinkley at 5:30, and then we went back to local, which was the big local broadcast at 6 o'clock. Never got my hands on the 6 o'clock. Never produced that one, but I did produce the 5 the 5 o'clock, and I'd start at 1:30 in the afternoon. That newscast was 3,500 words, and I'd have a crew of 5 when I began working on that, and I forget I know who it was. The film crew was 3, and then you had the talent, the guy who's going to go out there and read it. He's the idiot, and then me. Okay, and that's what I was. I don't know. I was still in my early 20s, but I was even viewed from looking back on it, I was a pretty seasoned guy, and pretty good news guy, pretty good head on my shoulder. Anyway, the talent who went out and actually did the reading on the air, he'd go and get our coffee. He was kind of the gopher. He'd kind of wander around, and he'd give him, and you'd finally give him the script, and he'd go over it and check it with you, and so on. And he didn't have to worry about timing it out, because I knew how to time it out. He had, I don't know how many minutes we had, probably 22 minutes out of 30, and so on. So, but anyway, I worked mostly with this one film crew and this one guy. And this guy had the company, kind of like a station wagon. Now, we were still filming those days. And so you had to shoot it, then you had to get it over to the film lab. It took 30 minutes to an hour. So you had to kind of get a running start if you're going to use something on your newscast, and so on. So anyway, this guy prowled, or as fast, a wonderful character. He prowled the city day and night with his dog, okay? And he came back with great footage, great stories, great things that you kind of wouldn't, nobody else got, and so on. And he was. I wrote wrong with this guy. This guy was just kind of an interesting guy. He's hanging on the police scanners, and he's driving around, what should I see, all night. And the story we're going to tell about him is that one afternoon or evening or sometime, he rolls up to an accident. And the fellow who, and a driver, is hanging halfway out of the car. A fairly serious accident, obviously. And so he goes back and he gets in his car. Now, this guy had his camera on with a pistol grip. Okay, so it's kind of like quick draw. Can't make this stuff up. So anyway, he goes back to, no thought of helping this poor guy, he's hanging out of the car. And he goes back to the car and he gets his light meter, and that's pretty good. And he adjusts one thing and another, and he's ready to go. He's got to make sure he's not got enough film, and it's up, they're ready to, and a Good Samaritan runs in to help the guy. I mean, he's hanging out of the car, for heaven's sake. He needs help. I mean, the ambulance is on the way, the police are on the way. They're not here yet. Okay, Good Samaritan. So now this Good Samaritan is in this, get out of my view here. I'm just helping the guy. I'm trying to get out of my view. Well, they get into it. And the good has something to say to the cameraman, and soon enough, the cameraman who's holding it kind of goes, pop! And he whacks the guy, the Good Samaritan, with his camera. So now, about this time, the ambulance shows up, and they've got this Good Samaritan sprawled on the ground. He also, I guess, is bleeding. And you have the guy in the car who's still hanging out of the car, and the ambulance guys, as we call them, EMT today, they look at the guy in the car, and then they look at the guy going, they load up the guy on the ground that had been by our camera guy. You gotta love it. We'll tell one last story, and then we'll let it go for this take. And this is that they built some new tennis courts out in Forest Park, which is a big park in St. Louis. And the powers that be in our newsroom, which was Austin Bridgman, a fellow by the name of Keezyweather, were really convinced that the aldermen had struck again. They built crappy tennis courts and were ripping off the public. Now, aldermen ripping off and politicians ripping off the public is almost kind of an old, expected mode of operation. Okay? You can figure if they put out some money out there, it's like catnip to a cat, that they go, how much of this can I get? So we're going to build tennis courts, but if we build cheesy tennis courts, I can put more money in my pocket. So they are loath to go out there because the aldermen and all these guys, they know them, so they need to send some undercover person, and that's me. So they tell me, I'm getting off work. I swing by Forest Park and go out there and talk to the tennis guy. You got some prominent national, international tennis guys out there batting the ball back and forth. Go out there and talk to them and see what they've got to say about the tennis courts, And let's get some quotes that say, these are really crappy tennis courts, and, because we know they spent a fortune building these things, and they claim, they're it's just a wonderful tennis courts. So I clip-clop on out there, and I spent some time talking to these guys, and what do you think? Oh, these are beautiful courts, they say. These are well-designed. They really spent some money here to do. Well, okay. So I go back in the next day, and I say, hey, look, the tennis people I'm talking to out there, they love the courts. Well, they cannot. They're pretty well convinced, guys I'm working for in the newsroom, that the kid doesn't have the chops, So they send somebody else out. They actually go out there, I think, they send a team out there to team it. And they found out that, remarkably, the aldermen were given money to build these tennis courts, and they spent the money on the tennis courts, and they built good tennis courts. I wonder how often that happened. And so on. So anyway, we have more stories to tell and archive for the long history. If anybody ever wants to come back by and have a look at TV at one of the biggest stations in the country in the mid-'60s, and at the dawn, it was the dawn of the color era, then we'll do our best to kind of tell those tales. I really had a good time at this station, and I really didn't, from a news standpoint, I really didn't belong there.